I love the Ace Attorney franchise. It's for sure within my top 5 favorite franchises of all time, next to Dynasty Warriors and Pokemon.
Although I suppose that last one can be questioned.
With that much admiration for the series, you might be wondering why I haven't made any dedicated videos on them for the channel yet. Well, that's because it's really hard to make videos on a franchise like this one. The problem with visual novel-esque games like Ace Attorney or Zero Escape is that you can really only play them once, after which you know all the puzzles and solutions, so making a Let's Play video or anything similar is, well, it can turn out kinda boring unless you play them blind. But that doesn't mean that I straight up won't try to make a video on the topic. I've been wanting to make another ranking video for a while now, and I feel like Ace Attorney might be a good option, since A, with the format I have for these types of videos, I don't have to worry about visuals all that much, and B, I can work on and edit this video a lot quicker and easier than I could with something like another Warriors episode. There's also another reason why I chose this kind of topic. Saying this is definitely going to date this video a touch, but I'm currently in the final few semesters of being a maritime cadet. The mate's license exams are literally just around the corner, and I do not have time to crank out dedicated videos right now, nor can I afford to put a crazy amount of focus into anything that isn't a Coast Pilot book. But it's also nearing the end of the year, and I didn't want to just upload nothing at all for this entire year, so I figured I'd at least try to do this. It's better than popping out some random uninspired video after being away from the channel for so long. After this goes up, it's nothing but celestial navigation and river narration for me. As for my departing gift until I graduate, this will pretty much be in the same format that I used for my Mario Kart 8 ranking video. I'll be ranking every single episode, or more specifically, every case from the Ace Attorney franchise in a mostly rapid-fire format, starting from the 4th worst going all the way to the 4th best, followed by the 3 worst and ending off with the 3 best. At least, that was the blueprint for this ranking. Truth be told, there are several cases that I decided to rank as pairs, since they're either halves to a whole story or just kinda hard to talk about on their own without mentioning them both together. Admittedly, it kinda skewed with the numbering a fair bit, but it didn't actually mess with the ranking as a whole, and even though I'll be talking about these paired cases together and treating these situations as two-way ties, they'll still be individually numbered. Also, this video is meant for everyone, both those who are new to Ace Attorney and those who are veterans like myself, but that being said, I should probably give a spoiler warning here. I tried my best to avoid talking about spoilers for this ranking, but even so, I would still proceed with caution if you haven't played certain games I talk about here. Obviously, I'm not going to bluntly reveal any culprits, but I might discuss some major plot points, so keep that in mind. Okay, so I actually do reveal one culprit in this ranking. I'll play this sound effect before starting that segment so you know where to skip to. Finally, just like my last ranking video, this one will obviously have visuals, but I'm more worried about the audio, so you won't miss anything important if you're not actually watching the screen. It'll just be there so you're not looking at a blank screen the whole time. I should mention here that while I do have access to record a lot of the games I talk about here, I do not have access to record all of them. So anybody that I borrowed footage from will be shown on screen right now just for clarity. I do not claim any of the footage from these games as my own, so please don't accuse me of anything heinous. I just want to talk about something that I love. I'm sorry that I don't have a 3DS capture card. Alright, I think that's all I got. How about now we get to the rankings? #51. The Kidnapped Turnabout. There are two main reasons why this case is so far down. First of all, I was around 13 when this game finally released in the US, and my tiny idiot brain was not prepared for the horror scene at the beginning. Pathetic, I know. But second, and more importantly, the plot holes in this case are really, really silly. You're telling me that you can figure out who the killer is based on what side of the head you were struck on? Dumbass, hitting someone on the head at an angle isn't that hard. I'm left-handed, but I'm sure even I can land a hit on the right side of your head just as easily. One more thing. You were given the blueprints to the building that the murder took place in, and you have to solve the secret of this building structure for yourself? Why wasn't the secret of the funhouse not in the blueprints from the get-go? 50. Turnabout Serenade. As much as I love Ace Attorney 4, I really had a meh time with this case. We're spoiled on the villain halfway through rather suddenly, and unlike when Danganronpa V3 did that, which amped the stakes by a lot, here it really butchered the stakes and the impact of this case. The characters were some of the most iconic, including Lamoire, but the whole episode was a bit muddled and the plot points were stretched thin. Like, am I really supposed to believe that a small teenager could fire such a large caliber revolver? I think just compared to the more entertaining twists in the other Apollo Justice cases, this one was just the most basic, which sucks because Clavier blasting Guilty Love on stage should have been a solid event. 49. Turnabout Visitor. Oh look, another case from Ace Attorney Investigation, super close to the bottom. Even though this is the first case in the game, Turnabout Visitor is way too short and the villain is not all that fun. I feel that we should have cross-examined at least one other witness instead of the same man 3 times. Like, come on. At the very least, when Gumshoe began to act fritzy after Portsman accused the Night Guard, only for the Night Guard to be revealed as Maggie, that put a smile on my face for sure. 48. Turnabout Time Traveler. A shame that the reunion case between Nick, Edgeworth, Maya, and Udgy had to be this much of a wash. Don't get me wrong, this case isn't awful, not even close, but boy was the outline of this case clumsy for lack of a better term. You prove that absolute fiction was indeed an absolute fiction, and that's pretty much it. They brought back Larry, but unlike everyone else, Larry hadn't changed at all after 8 literal years, and any hope I had left for him is reduced to ash. Don't come back, Larry, you're not needed anymore. Honestly, if Ellen and Soren as a pair weren't so unique and fun, then I wouldn't in good faith be able to recommend this DLC case. 47. The English Turnabout. Yes, Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright is being included in this list. What are you gonna do? Most people usually just ignore this game, but I ain't doing that. As someone who enjoys both the Professor Layton series and the Ace Attorney series, yeah, what a letdown this game turned out to be. The English Turnabout is a decent intro case, but it's pretty forgettable. That said, I do like how mostly every character in this game has an animation or two that make every case feel more involved. Like when Maya actually starts to hold up the murder weapon to help visualize the case. Nice touch. 46. The Adventure of the Unbreakable Speckled Band. I'm gonna get so much hate for placing a Ryunosuke case this far down, and yeah, I kinda deserve it. But I still stand by that this episode was definitely the weakest. There's no courtroom battle in this case, and the atmosphere is just everyone blaming the protagonist again, except even harder than before, and this time without good evidence. Oh, the Japanese victim wrote the word closet in Russian as a dying message, and their killer is hiding in the closet, even though there's a piece of paper stuck on the outside of the door. And even when shown that it couldn't have been him, the sailors are like, "Shut up, he is culprit." These sailors can fuck off, for real. 45. Turnabout Big Top. And here's the one you've been waiting for. It's not a very good case, but it's nowhere near as bad as everyone claims. I mean, I didn't like it for the longest time because I felt a peer pressure. Then I replayed Justice for All with Brett, and he went, "Dude, this episode is not that bad." And I just replayed it for the sake of this video, and guess what? I agree with Brett. The only 2 low points of this case was Mo, which, I mean, isn't that kind of the point? And the whole flying shtick. The very idea that the trial even pretended to entertain that was dumb, but you solve that mystery pretty quickly once you give it a real thought. And from there, the case gets a little better. 44. Turnabout Reminiscence. It's definitely telling how many cases from Ace Attorney Investigations 1 are so far down. This case is decent. Flashback cases are always fun, but this one's culprit was a little too obvious. Like, obviously it ain't Gumshoe, so that only leaves 2 possible suspects left. And even then, it's so painful. They nailed Francisca though. This little shit is exactly how I pictured her to look and act when she was 13, and a part of me would love to have another Edgeworth flashback case just to see him and Franny fight like siblings again. Ooh, let's have Kristoff be the defense lawyer. Ooh, oh my god, I'm writing this down. 43. Turnabout Countdown. So let me get this straight. The courtroom is demolished with a bomb, and yet it's one of the most mid-first cases I've ever played? First of all, this shouldn't have even been the first case. The absolute shock of the courtroom blowing up would have made a beautiful plot twist during the latter cases. Dual Destinies overall has a pacing problem. They should have made the first case something short and sweet which could stand as Phoenix's actual first case upon re-earning his badge. Then follow it up with the Ten Mataro case, and then the Orca case. But that's just me bitching. 42. The Fire Witch. For being the first genuine witch trial, I think this case is actually not bad. Having to narrow down a culprit between 5 different witnesses all at the same time is a really cool diversion from what we've gotten in an Ace Attorney game up to this point. The problem is that all of the cases in this game are too short to truly get invested in, so while the premise of this case had something going for it, it solved too quickly and then we're thrust into the next plotline. The English Turnabout and the Fire Witch are both good tutorial cases, but by the time that we wrap up the latter, we're already halfway through the Phoenix Wright section of the game. And there's only one more miniature case left to get through before we're thrust into the grand finale. 41. The First Turnabout. For being the first case ever, yeah, it's kind of adorable. You can beat this case in like 5-ish minutes and you nail the culprit like immediately. Well done. 40. The Lost Turnabout. Hey, we need a reason to have Phoenix Wright go through a tutorial for the first case of this sequel. What should we do? Oh, I know. Let's hit him with a fire extinguisher. Bro. Only Maggie can get put in a ridiculous situation like this, and honestly, I'm for it. They needed Phoenix to be in a clean state, and caving in his skull to give him amnesia is the most straightforward and funniest way to get it done. 39. The Adventure of the Great Departure. Now it's Ryunosuke's turn to have a first case, and he's being accused of murder. Okay, fine. At least this time the evidence isn't actively proving his innocence. Jesus Christ. I think this case is good because throughout the game, Ryunosuke constantly related his actions back to Kazuma and desired to prove himself for Kazuma's sake. And in the intro case, we are shown this bond excellently. Some say the case was too long, but in my eyes, the longer that these two share the spotlight, the better. 38. Turnabout Target. Okay, wow, 4th intro case in a row. This time for Reggie. It's an improvement in every way to Edgeworth's first case in his first game, and the plot is such a smooth transition from Investigations 1 as well. After the events of the last game, of course the police are going to call Edgeworth to solve the attempted assassination of a foreign power. He's Miles Edgeworth! This case takes all the bad elements from Edgeworth's first spin-off game and goes, let's try this again, but correctly this time. 37. Turnabout Storyteller. The one case that really beats Westerners over the head, proving that this series originated in Japan, where the victim is a Rakugo comedian and the accused is a soba shop owner. I gotta be real, this case doesn't bother me as much as it probably should. My only gripe is that the one case Athena Sykes focused on since Saving Black Quill is way too short. If the storyboard directors had tweaked the situation to make this case both longer and more thought-provoking, I feel like people wouldn't have such an issue with this one. 36. Turnabout Sisters. Wow, way to kill off a main character in the second case ever. Now we'll never get to see Mia Fey ever again. This case is here to let you know that the training wheels are now officially off. And what better way for Phoenix to prove himself for real than to defend his boss's sister from being accused of murder? Man, having to defend Maya from false charges was such a rush, but I'm glad she doesn't have to go through such an ordeal again. 35. The Rite of Turnabout. Finally, a reunion with Maya after all these years, and she's been arrested for murder. Another great case, maybe a bit too overly complicated, but the more times we get to dick around in the pool of souls, the better. I don't know what the general consensus is on divination seances, but I enjoy them. It's nice to see Ace Attorney returning to an old but familiar concept in this series, spirit channeling, and making it against all odds very fitting for a courtroom logic battle video game. 34. Turnabout Reclaimed. Nothing screams Ace Attorney better than Phoenix Wright defending a literal whale in court, and shockingly, it's fun. That said, I wish this wasn't the first case Nick signed up for since getting his badge back. Like I said, I'd rather have episode 1 be the man getting back into the groove and have this case take place later. I also think this case should have been in the base game and not DLC, but all that said, the plot of this case is sound and Orla is adorable, so it's fine. 33. Turnabout Samurai. The first case that Phoenix and Maya work together on, where they defend a movie star accused of killing his coworker. What a ride! Not a bad case, and the outcome is honestly a bit heartbreaking. I will never look at Fancy Fences the same way ever again. I like how this is one of the few cases where, at least in the beginning, suspects can't use the "I got no reason to kill" defense, because even the police acknowledge that the accused doesn't have a motive either. 32. The Golden Court. Without a doubt, the best case in this crossover game. But wait, we've only covered 3 of the 4 cases!
Oh dear.
In this case, Layton ends up in some hot water, and Maya's been arrested for murder. Despite this game's mediocrity, I think this case is a stand-up above the rest. The team-up of Phoenix Wright and Luke Triton halfway through and after the case is a cute little subversion as well. 31. The Stolen Turnabout. Ron Delight. Alright, I think I about covered everything. Okay, for real. For being a case centered around a famous thief, it's done pretty cleverly, until they show a flashback image of the corpse in this case, and oh my god. Why did they have to add that much detail for a picture of a dead guy? Am I weird? Also, I might be misremembering, but did anyone actually say what the murder weapon was in this case? Are we supposed to believe that the culprit just used their hands to smack this guy to death? 30. Reunion and Turnabout. Awesome, a reunion with Maya since Nick rescued Edgeworth, and she's been arrested for murder. This case does 2 things I like. It gives us more information and lore on spirit channeling, a phenomenon in the games that blends quite well with the logic battles of the Ace Attorney series, and it introduces us to Franziska von Karma, the MVP of Justice for All and one of the few characters that makes me hype when she appears in a case. 29 and 28, Turnabout Memories and Turnabout Beginnings. It didn't feel right to separate these two cases, and honestly, I would have ranked them pretty close to each other anyway if I hadn't. These two cases cover Mia Fey's first and second courtroom debuts, and while the cases are simple, the impact and the characters are anything but. Terry Falls is a tragic character, and the way his trial ends hurts my heart. As for Mia's second case, you're defending some frail weenie accused of electrocuting a college classmate. Oh, 27, Turnabout Airlines. This is the only solid banger in Investigations 1, and I actually like Investigations 1. We've never had a case take place in such a unique circumstance like a plane. And speaking of planes, this is the most hysterically built plane in the world. I've only ever been on like 3 planes in my life, but is any of this actually realistic? Take the elevator to the lounge. Don't forget to visit the gift shop. This isn't an airplane, it's a flying hotel. Once the plane lands and the investigation enters full swing, we get to work with Franziska, which is always a plus, and the details of this case's plot are done very well, unlike the rest of Investigations 1. 26. The Return of the Great Departed Soul. Oh god, another fictional temporal machine? Well, yes, but actually no. The Great Ace Attorney is the most recent game that came out to the West, so I don't want to dwell on too much of these cases, but this episode in particular continues to play with the morality of Ryunosuke's willpower and his role as an attorney. He can either prove that his client's machine is fake and make it easier to prove his innocence in murder, but doing that would go against his client's wishes, taking away everything that they had worked so hard to achieve. It's a real trolley problem, and to think, this beautiful, emotional, and well thought out case is technically the weakest of the Great Ace Attorney Resolve. Also, before we continue, I just want to explain that while the Great Ace Attorney was released as 2 separate games in Japan, internationally the games were released as one collection featuring both games, which is how I played them. Because of that, I see the Great Ace Attorney as a single game featuring 10 cases, with the case I just talked about being episode 8. I might make a comment relating to this and people might try to correct me saying it's technically game 2, case 3. Just thought I'd give that disclaimer. Okay, back to the ranking. 25, Bridge to the Turnabout. The best way that the classic trilogy could have ended. While Maya and Phoenix are visiting a training temple, a string of malicious events ruin the evening and everything starts to go wrong. Ending with a visitor to the temple dead, a famous bridge burning down, Phoenix being put out of commission in a hospital, and Maya ending up stranded on an island, possibly with a psycho murderer. Multiple major plot lines from every game up to this point come back roaring in, where it all comes to a head in the end, and it's done so well that Shu Takumi deserves an award. Despite this, a major plot point regarding the case itself, i.e. the pendulum maneuver, is stupid. So stupid and absurd in execution that I cannot rank this frankly amazing case any higher. I mean, there is no way in hell that this should have worked. I have less trouble believing the Phantom's ladder jump in Dual Destinies than I do with the stupid pendulum bullshit that was used here. 24. Rise from the Ashes. The longest episode in the entirety of the Ace Attorney games that isn't actually stretched out between filler and wasted time. What better method to get away with such a densely packed case than to have it as the bonus case from the first game? Everything Phoenix learned as a lawyer from his first case to now is put to the test as he steps up to defend one of the most important people in the legal world, the chief prosecutor. Definitely an excellent final challenge of sorts to bookend the first game, and not to mention the introduction of several fan-favorite characters, like Emma Skye. 23. Turnabout Corner. Another name for this case should have been Apollo Justice Joins the Yakuza, because that's essentially what he ends up doing, not understanding the defense request right away. Seriously, that's a stupid name. Corner? You mean corner of the street? Do better. The case itself is so lighthearted despite the circumstances. I mean, you're defending the son of a Yakuza boss accused of shooting his doctor in a park. That's fun. And while the victim was pulling a random ass noodle stand behind him. Like, wait, what? 22 and 21. The Cosmic Turnabout, and Turnabout for Tomorrow. The more I talk about Dual Destinies here in the rankings, the more I'm convincing myself to just make a separate video talking about it as a whole. Both of these cases make for a thrilling conclusion to this game, but again, I think the pacing is a bit wonky here. The Cosmic Turnabout starts in the courtroom, in which that sequence is so laughably short that it rivals the first Turnabout from the first game in length. The investigation and second day of the trial make up for that, but then we're immediately thrown into Turnabout for Tomorrow, meaning that cases 4 and 5 of Dual Destinies are about the same case, just split in half. Combined, I feel like these two are great, but the way they were presented to us is kinda confusing, in a way. But then again, maybe I'm just overthinking it. 20. The Adventure of the Blossoming Attorney. Oh wow, I was not expecting to play as the assistant character in one of these games, pretending to be a lawyer no less. And it ties back to the first case of the game in a way that pulls you in and drives you to want to learn more. God, the Great Ace Attorney is such a good game. This case gives us a short, pleasant break from London's Grand Court, and thankfully, this time you don't have the crux of having to defend yourself. Just, don't let the courtroom know that you're a woman. Welcome to the ye olden times, boys. 19. The Forgotten Turnabout. This case, along with the Grand Turnabout, take place at the same time, with one directly leading up to the next. But unlike with the Cosmic Turnabout leading up to Turnabout for Tomorrow, the two cases here are different enough for me to separate them. The amnesia trope is getting a little stale in the media nowadays, but I like what they did here. Giving a secondary character amnesia and leaving Edgeworth to solve what happened to them is a nice subversion. Not to mention the twist leading up to the final showdown before getting to the Grand Turnabout. There's a good reason why Investigations 2 is beloved and why fans are seething that it was never released internationally. 18. Turnabout Goodbyes. Miles Edgeworth was such a serious thorn in Phoenix's side during the first game that when you reach the final case, not counting the bonus case, your only thought is, what more could Edgeworth possibly do to us? Only for the game to put Edgeworth himself in the hot seat. Aw man, it's such a treat. It's not really the final case for the first game anymore, but it still serves as a good case, especially regarding the relationship between Phoenix, Maya, and especially Edgeworth. 17. The Monstrous Turnabout. The fact that we almost immediately throw out the possibility that a real monster killed the victim here during the trial makes this case so much more enjoyable for me. We're not wasting our time here. This is what should have happened in Turnabout Time Traveler. Also, I unironically love Jinxie. She is a gem that needs to be protected. My only gripe with this case, and by default all the other Apollo-centric cases after this one, is that the devs completely ruined Apollo's perceived mechanic. If you've played Dual Destinies or Spirit of Justice before or after playing Apollo's flagship title, you'll know exactly what I mean. 16. Turnabout
Card Games.
Speaking of Apollo's game, his courtroom debut. The only reason this case isn't any higher is because of the implications of the foreseeable future involving the defendant of this case. But that's not really poor Apollo's fault, as the creator of Ace Attorney was forced to follow certain criteria when making the fourth game. This is due to the success of the Phoenix Wright trilogy. The case itself is still good, and as a lover of poker myself, Turnabout
Card Games
scratched an itch I didn't know I wanted scratching. 15. The Imprisoned Turnabout. Objection! There's a trap door in the well! I'm sorry, but Jello Apocalypse's videos on the Ace Attorney games gives me life. This case is a surprising banger in my opinion, even though it includes elements that others would deem as making the case quote-unquote bad. But yeah, I don't agree with those people. Regina Barry is not that bad. You people are just mean. 14 and 13, The Adventure of the Clouded Kokoro and The Memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. The story of these cases technically play back to back even if they're not played chronologically in order, being cases 4 and 7 respectively. Most of the characters overlap and these two cases have the same defendant. Poor Saseki. Interestingly enough, both of these cases are unique in which both victims actually survive their ordeals, although I don't think I can ever do these two characters justice without spilling too many beans. I will say this. The way these two cases conclude hurt me. It was so sad and yet so good! I'm paraphrasing this quote, but to be or not to be? No, you don't deserve to be. Oh, it's such a good diss! 12. The Adventure of the Unspeakable Story. It's funny how I haven't brought up the involvement of Sherlock Holmes in this ranking yet, but in The Great Ace Attorney, he's a prominent figure. Unfortunately, due to copyright, they had to tweak his name a bit, but at least we still got the game in the end. This case involves a bit of Herlock Sholmes' backstory with his, flatmate, Iris. And after a bit of wrong time, wrong place, Ryunosuke and Iris are left to defend their friend from murder accusations after a robbery gone wrong, and I'm not even talking about Sholmes. He got shot during the robbery and is in surgery by the time the trial begins. I would try to explain a bit better, but I don't have 2-ish hours. Go play The Great Ace Attorney. It's one of the best games in the whole series. 11. The Inherited Turnabout. What happens when a flashback case intersects with a case during the present? You get the Inherited Turnabout, where a former apprentice of Edgeworth's father asks Edgeworth for help reinvestigating an old case they worked on almost 20 years ago. While the two are going over the case at the museum where the incident happened, a man is almost killed from a gas attack, and from there the two cases begin to intersect. I know my explanation makes the situation a bit too coincidental, but believe me, the two cases here swirl together seamlessly. Too bad Larry showed up, or else this case would have been a little higher on the list. 10. Turnabout Academy. Athena Sykes is a much better character than what I feel the general consensus says about her, and it hurts my feelings that she was brushed off in Spirit of Justice. Here, however, she stars as the lead lawyer and frankly the best case in Dual Destinies. Her knowledge of what it means to be an attorney is put to the test, and in my opinion, she passes with an A+. That's a classroom joke, because as evidenced by the name, this case takes place in a high school. This episode also gets a high grade from me because of all the excellent characters we meet here that I desperately want to see return. Especially Juniper, I will die on this hill. 9. Turnabout Succession. The final case of Apollo Justice, or Ace Attorney 4. It's hard to explain with this video exactly what's going on, but essentially this case is a test trial by jury, where you play as 3 people in total at different parts. Apollo, obviously, who's in charge of the defense, Phoenix, whose section involves filling in all the plot details in preparation for the case at hand, and finally you play as one of the members of the jury, who I won't spoil, that decides after watching the entire trial whether the defendant is guilty or innocent. I don't think I need to explain why this case made the top 10. It's a brilliant work of storytelling, and I hope this concept eventually returns. If not, then at least bring back the fact that all this actually happened. 8. The Foreign Turnabout. I honestly can't believe that a tutorial case made it this high on the list. Holy shit. But seeing as how Phoenix is in an entirely different country this time, yeah, I think a few explanations this time are kinda mandatory. The plot of this case is simple yet still gripping, and the atmosphere during the trial is oppressive. Like, if you lose this case then you are going to die oppressive. And not to mention, everyone here hates you! All of that combined makes victory here in this courtroom feel all the more rewarding. And then there's the divination seance, which I personally enjoy. Basically, you watch the victim's final moments in a sacred pool in front of the witness stand, and you have to point out the flaws that appear in the vision. It's really cool and a refreshing twist to the Ace Attorney format. I don't know if there's enough justification to have a whole second game take place in the Kingdom of Khura'in again, but I'd love to have at least some kind of isolated bonus case take place here for a future title. 7. The Adventure of the Runaway Room. I could talk about how batshit bonkers this case is, but I think I'll just borrow a clip of Nico B playing this case blind and let his raw reaction do all the talking for me.
What the fuck? The end? What the hell? Holy shit! That was insane! This is... Wow! What the fuck? Dude! Seriously! That was so fucking good! That was... Man, that was good! Holy shit, guys! What the fuck? That was so, like, mold-breaking and just, like, new and different and exciting and interesting and just, like, absolutely fascinating. Like, such an unexpected conclusion. We never had anything like that happen in, like, any of these attorney games. Holy crap, though. That was really good. Wow, okay, so, that happened. That was a thing that happened.
6. The Magical Turnabout. Capcom shafted Trucy hard after having such a prominent role in Apollo Justice, so it was well deserved that she got a whole episode dedicated to her. I would say that it's a bit redundant making her a defendant. I mean, I think at this point the only 2 characters left to be accused of murder are Apollo and Pearl. But I think how they handled this case was done very intelligently. Essentially, it all goes back to Trucy's lineage, the Graham Rye family of magicians, which I was not expecting to see referenced again, but I'm happy that they were. This case is definitely deserving of being an Apollo Justice case, and seeing Apollo and Trucy's personalities bounce off each other again after so many years is but only one of the many reasons why this case is ranked so high. I mean, they moved the frickin' witness stand out of the way during the trial to let Trucy perform magic while she's testifying. I didn't even know that thing could be moved. 5. The Grand Turnabout. This is the magnum opus of Miles Edgeworth. A bunch of different plot points are seamlessly joined together to give us one more final hurrah for Edgeworth's spin-off games. Why do I know that this one is the last? Because this game was never released outside of Japan. I'm still bitter. Anyways, this case slaps. So much happens and it comes together so well. Ending with one of the greatest and not to mention most dangerous final bosses of the Ace Attorney franchise. When you manage to give a redemption to one of the most hated characters of the whole game and transform him into one of the most beloved ever, that's how you know you made the final case grand. Alright, and with that we've made it to the top and bottom 3. Kinda. Yeah, I did warn that pairing several cases together like I did might make the layout a bit wonky, and it did. But I stand by my decisions. Next, let's go over the worst cases I've had to play through. I mentioned that I love pretty much every case in every game, but man, did these episodes really test my patience. Third worst, Recipe for Turnabout. Jump ahead to the time frame on screen if you don't want to be spoiled on the culprit in this case. In my opinion, it's not that important because this case sucks, but I'll still play fair for those who want to play these games blind. Yeah, to no one's surprise, this case is still really hard to get through. Not because it's difficult, but because it's embarrassing. From the awful characters we have, excluding Maggie, obviously, to the ridiculous mind games throughout the trial that are just straight up stupid and not at all clever. And then we get to the absolute worst plot hole I've ever seen in any of these games. This inconsistency is so bad that if anyone had actually noticed, Phoenix Wright would not have won this case and Maggie would have been fucked. I'm just gonna spoil it because screw this case. At the end of the trial, Phoenix manages to trick the true culprit into revealing he knows what container the poison that killed the victim was held in. Information that, according to Phoenix, Tigray shouldn't know about if he's not the killer. Except, no! Even if he wasn't the true murderer, Tigray should still have known about the poison and the bottle it was held in. Why? Because Tigray was pretending to be Phoenix Wright during the first time this case went to court. The man was posing as Maggie's lawyer and was part of the courtroom proceedings months before Phoenix even learned about this case. If anyone should know about the container holding the murder weapon, it would be the person pretending to be the defendant's lawyer. Excuse my terminology here, but this is Korekio Shinguji levels of... If Tigray had mentioned he was Maggie's attorney and knew about the poison bottle at this moment, he would have gotten away with it. The fact this moron got caught just makes me wonder how much dumber the police and the legal system can get in this series. Oh, wait. Cardboard badge. Got it. Second worst, Turnabout Ablaze. How can a case be considered worse than one where the culprit got caught despite a massive story oversight? Simple. Make it 10 hours long and not bother to give us a solid or satisfying payoff. While the first half of this case is somewhat enjoyable enough, at least in my eyes, the latter half of this case does nothing noteworthy. Nothing is investigated, nothing new is learned that we don't already know, and nothing noteworthy happens that would otherwise advance or add anything new to the story. It is literally just Edgeworth and the final villain of the game spouting the same thing over and over again. You're the killer. No, I'm not. Occasionally someone will jump in and say, I'm here to help, only for the culprit to go, yeah, no, do better. And it just keeps going on and on and on until 5 fucking hours have passed and you just want to see the culprit break down. Only to give us the most blue ballsy pathetic culprit I've ever seen in my life. Literally the best part of this case is Edgeworth shouting objection and screaming at Larry and a windy old bag to go away. Seriously, the only way for a case to be any kind of worse than this is to just throw away everything you have going and render the entirety of the game and story to nothing. Yet, somehow... And now for the worst Ace Attorney case ever to be created, the trial of the Great Witch. The only good thing going for this case is that Professor Herschel Layton stands as the opposition during the latter half of this trial. One of the few men capable of topping even Miles Edgeworth as a worthy opponent in the courtroom. And unfortunately, this legendary battle between two of the greatest protagonists in visual novel history was written and executed in the worst way possible. It's one thing to waste a good case with two great characters. It's another thing entirely to do what the trial of the Great Witch did to conclude this game. The case starts off well enough, nothing extraordinary, but enough to keep you intrigued. But then suddenly the main antagonist of the entire game up to this point shows up out of nowhere, and with no indication that this was about to happen, suddenly info dumps the entire background and explanation of everything that was going on surrounding the mysteries during this entire game. How the magic worked, how everyone got here in the first place, how everyone managed to fall in line, and even what the whole hidden purpose of this entire setting was for. Everything all at once, all done in the span of like 5 to 7 minutes. When I got to this part of the game, I actually had to put my DS down, because I literally could not believe what I was witnessing. It was like the development team ran out of ideas at the last second and just gave up. Just like that. And at this point in the trial, with maybe 20-ish more minutes to go, I was still supposed to prove some arbitrary fact about the case that barely even mattered? How about no? I wanted to figure out the mystery behind this mystical town's magic on my own, and you just blurted out the whole explanation into my face, like it never actually mattered to the story. You threw out one of the most important plot points of the entire game like a fart in the wind, and now you expect me to care and solve some riddle that doesn't actually make that big of a difference? I don't care about some stupid bell, I don't care about a fire that happened many years ago, and honestly, after what this game just did to all the mysteries, I don't care about the Deuteragonist plight anymore. Why should I? They were probably about to explain that out of nowhere too. The last trial that takes place in Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright literally crashes and burns just as you think the game is about to have you solve the most important mysteries. And then it just stops. All the momentum is halted, and everything is explained without any input from the player. They just tell you everything. I really did have a good time playing this game back when it was finally released to the United States. I couldn't wait to see how this crossover between two beloved franchises would end. Only to end up with this. I can't bring myself to recommend this game to anybody. A part of me wants to say, hey, just play this game all the way into the last case, then jump off as soon as the storyteller shows up at the witness stand. Here's a better idea. Come up with an ending yourself, because honestly, whatever you come up with would probably be better than what actually happened. But the problem is, the explanations given to us could have worked if they had just let us solve these riddles ourselves. I've never played a game that ended so poorly that the entire story became retroactively tarnished all at once. And because of this act of vandalism on our intelligence, the trial of the Great Witch is easily the worst case within the Ace Attorney series that I have ever played. It's a good thing, then, that the best cases of Ace Attorney completely turned this sour mood of mine around. Let's go over the best of the best, at least in my opinion. Fourth best, Farewell My Turnabout. Justice for All gets a bad rap, but nobody denies that its final case is one of the best in the entire series. With Maya having been abducted and Phoenix being forced to defend someone to ensure her safety, this case takes the stakes of what had been a fairly decent game up to this point and ramps the tension to a 12. Things get even worse when Nick has to make perhaps the most daunting decision of his entire life. The way this case ends is perfect, if you choose to make it so. And that's the beauty of it. In the end, Phoenix has to put what he thought he knew about being a lawyer aside, if he really wants to make it out of this with a perfect ending. While I do agree that Bridge to Turnabout is also excellent, there's something about Farewell My Turnabout that just feels like a more satisfying conclusion, even though it's far from the end of Phoenix Wright's adventures in the courtroom. To me, it feels more personal, especially when you factor in the circumstances surrounding your client in this case. But that's all I'll say about that. Third best and second best, Twisted Karma and His Last Bow, and The Resolve of Ryunosuke Naruhodo. This is the one time that I absolutely do not want to spoil anything about the topic within this ranking. The last two cases of the Great Ace Attorney are downright magical, and I refuse to ruin the conclusion to Ryunosuke's story with a few one-off lines. I implore everyone watching this video, if there's any desire within you to play through the story, please give it a chance. With these two cases being your final hurdles, I promise you won't be disappointed. And now for my favorite Ace Attorney case of all time. Turnabout Revolution. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me and insist that the resolve of Ryunosuke Naruhodo is a better ending to an Ace Attorney game. And I get it, that case rules, no doubt. But here's the thing, I've been a fan of the character of Apollo Justice since his debut game came out in 2008. I had a much more enjoyable time following him than I did with Phoenix, and while I did play these games out of order, after all was said and done, I still preferred Apollo over Phoenix. When Capcom announced that the next game to come out after the Investigations games was going to be focused on Phoenix again, I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed. Apollo was far from treated dirty in Dual Destinies, but I was still bummed that Phoenix hogged the spotlight again after his own trilogy already ended so beautifully. Then Spirit of Justice was revealed, and once again, Phoenix was front and center on the cover. I was definitely excited for the game, no doubt, but I was still a little disheartened that my favorite protagonist of the series was once again sidelined. So, imagine my absolute shock when Spirit of Justice pulls a gotcha! And places Apollo as the main character in the final case, in a game where Phoenix is the man pointing and shouting with his name on the cover. And let's talk about this final case, shall we? The first half of Turnabout Revolution takes place in America, where a civil dispute pits Apollo and Phoenix against each other in the courtroom. Upon seeing this, my mind literally melted. I'm witnessing a showdown between Phoenix Wright and Apollo Justice, and I'm playing as Apollo? Even if you consider yourself a hardcore Ace Attorney nut like me, Phoenix has stood in the center stage for so long that everyone would have expected to be controlling him in this situation. So Apollo gets his moment and beats Phoenix in the civil case. Awesome. He got his time to shine, and it was better than I could have ever hoped. Now it's time for the setting to jump back to Khura'in for Phoenix to do his thing in the—
Objection!
Nope, we're still playing as Apollo! There is one part of this case where you are indeed investigating as right, but by the time the curtain rises for the final trial to begin in this foreign nation, you've swapped back to Apollo's perspective. That's right, both cases in this episode are for him, and I couldn't have been happier. And it's not like I love Turnabout Revolution because it's Apollo focused. No, both trials here are very fun, very challenging, and oh so satisfying to play through. I'm sure that I'm in the minority with this pick, but I just straight up do not care. This was the best episode to play through in my opinion, and with how brilliantly Spirit of Justice ended, I can only hope that eventually a new game starring Apollo will blow us away. Or, you know, let Phoenix Wright take the spotlight again for Ace Attorney 7. I mean, God forbid we have 2 other lawyers that could sure benefit for some more screen time, but nah. Capcom only wants Takumi to make more games starring the blue guy, and the other 2 can suffice with the table scraps. But that's just the Apollo fanboy and me being bitter. Still excited for Ace Attorney 7 though, assuming it ever comes out. Well, I think I've said all that needs to be said. If you like this video, don't forget to buy the great Ace Attorney so Shu Takumi can convince Capcom to let him make Ace Attorney 7. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to prepare for some exams. Until next time, guys, peace. Oh, and objection, take that, hold it, yeah.